Hello and welcome to May's Mixed Media Menagerie. That is a lot of M's. This month we are joined by guest artist Jolene, and our themes this month are to use watercolors, soft pastels, and we have a floral theme. So we are going to jump right into it. I have my journal here, and I have some Liquitex heavy matte gel medium and also a ledger paper. And I'm just going to, I wanted my background to be kind of more basic for this. So I took this ledger paper that I had actually spray painted with some, I think it's parchment Liquitex spray paint, and through a stencil, and you can't really see the spray paint very well. It was kind of just an experiment, so I found this paper and I thought it would look good underneath, because my plan, especially with the florals and the watercolors, was to do some sort of sketch of a floral, and I didn't want my background to be too loud. So there's that top little space there. I could have totally found another piece of a ledger paper that would have worked up there, but I was being lazy and I just found some book paper in my drawer and decided to rip it up and use that instead. So now I'm taking my gesso and I'm just going to scrape it all over these papers, still letting some of that writing show through, but obviously kind of pushing it back a little bit, and also providing a ground for the sketch and the watercolor. Many people don't really think about the fact that you can use watercolors on top of gesso. It's kind of similar to a watercolor ground. Obviously not as specialized, but still. So now I am sketching my botanical. You might think that this is just coming out of my head, but I actually have a picture from Instagram pulled up on my computer screen, which is right in front of me, so I'm able to look at that while I'm sketching. So I'm mostly looking at the picture and not really looking at the paper too much. I'll look at the paper when I kind of pick up my pencil to start a new petal, just to make sure that I'm in the right place. But mostly I'm looking at the screen, and I just follow the lines. It's something that I learned from Wendy Brightbill in one of her floral classes, is the way to sketch is to just draw the lines as you see them. And so as you start out, it doesn't look like much, and you might get a little discouraged, but if you just keep going, by the end it looks like a flower, and it actually, looks really pretty. So this is a peony picture that actually I think I got on Wendy Brightbill's Instagram. Oh, and I am using a General's Peel and Sketch charcoal pencil. This is not a China marker, but it looks like one. But it is it's actually a charcoal pencil, and it's activated a little like a Stabilo with water. Charcoal is a little different with that, and that it doesn't really turn into like a paint. It turns into kind of like a powder almost, but it's still water soluble. And you can see, I'm drawing some things and then I'm not really liking it, so I erased it a little bit, and I'm using some of that malleable rubber stuff for an eraser. I can't remember what it's called, but it's different than a regular eraser, as it's kind of like a putty. And I'm not really speeding too much up here, as I kind of want to show you my process for sketching rather than just speed through it lightning fast and then all of a sudden there's a flower there. So now I'm sketching these are actually roses. They're different than like a normal rose, like a stem rose. It's more of a rose from a bush. And again, I'm looking at a picture on my computer, but I'm also kind of making it my own. So like for that bud, I was looking at the picture, but now like the stems and the leaves are something that I'm doing myself. And then I'm also going to add a couple other flowers to go along with it. So it's not just, you know, one flower on one side, one flower on the other side, and that's it. We're gonna have like a whole little vine, if you will, of flowers on this side. So I felt like there needed to be some greenery maybe on this side. So I was trying to add that, and then I ultimately didn't like it because it made the peony feel, I don't know, maybe more like fake. I don't know. It just didn't look right, so I erased it. And you can still kind of see the lines, and I could have gone in maybe with a different eraser and tried to get rid of those lines, but it's really not a big deal. And so I'm going to finish the other side with the sketch of another little flower here, and then we'll get into some watercolors. Alright, so I have my 2 watercolor palettes here, and then also my soft pastels. And this watercolor palette, the one that you can see the most of, is mostly handmade paints from a company called The Ocean Paper, and they're in Hawaii. And I was turned on to them by Jean Oliver. She had made a post about like her favorite travel palettes and stuff like that, and I really liked the way that these watercolors looked. And they're very, I would say they're a little more opaque than normal watercolors. They're a little more like chalky, and because they're handmade, so I would imagine they're made with some kind of material that like a clay or a stone or something. But they are really cool, and I really like the effects that they give. So I am kind of just going through, and I want each petal to be a different color. Obviously repeating some colors, but I want them all to look a little different, and I'm not really minding if some of the paints kind of blend together. That's actually, as I've said many times, one of my favorite things about watercolors is that they blend and leak together. So now while the peony is drying a little bit, I'm going to start on the other side. I started with this pink and it was a little too pink for me. I wanted them to be a little lighter than, because the peony has a lot of oranges and pinks in it. I kind of wanted the other side to be a little, more neutral, I guess. So I'm gonna kind of do some lighter tones, some lighter pinks, and lighter, I have this almost like a Titan buff kind of color. So we'll kind of go back and forth on that side until it is what I want. I don't know why, but one of my favorite things to paint is the greenery. I love mixing greens in my leaves. There's this one green that I didn't end up using actually, but it's like a cascade green from Daniel Smith, and it has some blue tones in there that kind of come out as you water it down, which is really interesting. But here I'm just using, I think it's like a Van Gogh kind of army kind of green. I can't remember what it's called. And then also this green black that I got from Aaron as a Christmas gift as part of a set. And I'm kind of just letting those pool together. And something that you'll notice about the watercolors on the gesso is that they move a lot more than if they're just on watercolor paper. That's kind of why I like it on the gesso a little bit better, because they do have that ability to kind of move around, and it has a little bit more unpredictability, and I just think it gives a cool effect, especially when you just drop other colors in there and let them kind of spread around. It looks really cool. So now it's time to do the background. I first started, I knew I wanted to do a minty kind of turquoisey background, and I started with watercolors first, but it didn't give the opacity that I wanted, so I ended up switching to acrylics, and I got out my Lukas acrylic in mint and then my Dina Wakley turquoise, and I still watered them down, and they're still kind of watercolor-esque, if I can say that, because they're still really thin, but it's a little more opacity and a little more coverage which is what I ultimately wanted. And some of you will say, would it not have been easier to paint the background first and then draw over it? And that might be true. But especially with the acrylics, actually with the watercolors too, it's going to change the way that the paints work and the way that they look when you paint the background first. So while you could do that and like use a clear gesso or something like that over it to act as a ground for the watercolors, it just changes the way things look, and I think it looks kind of pretty when you have the paint going around the flowers. It just gives some kind of like, I hate using the word painterly, but painterly effect. So now you can see that I'm breaking into my pastels. I have this tin of my favorite pastels, and they're just pieces of them because you're not gonna ever use the whole thing, right? Like, I don't need a whole giant pastel in my tin. I can just have a small piece of it and replace it when I'm done. And this way I can have this small tin that I could travel with or anything like that, and I always have my favorite colors handy. So the downside is that I can't really tell you what they are. I can't really, say, well, that is a such and such and it's colored green 76. I can vaguely remember, but most of those square kind of rectangular ones are new pastels, Prismacolor new pastels. I do have a couple, I'm not going to say it right, but that pink is like a tetragus. It's like a little rectangle, flat thing. And it's really flaky, but it covers really well. As you can see, like those light pink areas look really cool. And so I just have a mix of everything, and I wouldn't be too concerned with soft pastels about brand. I think a lot of them are very similar. They're mostly all water soluble. The new pastels maybe a little more so. But yeah. So now I am watercoloring through a stencil just to add a little more interest to the background. This is my new favorite stencil, which is an older stencil from Stencil Girl, also actually by Wendy Brightbill. It's called Floral Frolics. So I'm just watercoloring through that with a darker color. It's kind of more of a Payne's gray. It actually might be the blue black from that set that Erin gave me. And I'm just gonna watercolor it all over. And then I'm just kind of freshening up some of those green colors as some of them kind of got lost a little bit. And now I'm gonna add some green pastels to those. And you'll see that I'm using like a little brighter kind of a green. This is like a minty green new pastel, almost like a turquoise. I think it's called pistachio. Actually, that one might not be pistachio, but it's close. And so I'm just adding a little more texture to those leaves and a little more interest. But I really like the way that the watercolor stenciling in the background came out. It's obviously not a perfect stencil, right? But I just wanted to add a little texture and interest, and you still get a floral feeling because it's a floral stencil. So I'm really happy with how that turned out. I really like using the soft pastels with my florals to add little pops of color and just little interest areas. I'm taking this darker one now and just like adding little tiny areas around some of the petals. And it's not going to be something that's super obvious, but it's still, an extra layer of texture and color that wasn't there before. And I think that pastels are perfect for doing something like that. But that is actually going to wrap everything up. You might be surprised I didn't add any speckles, but I felt like the flowers kind of spoke for themselves. The background and the texture and the color was already there, and I didn't feel like it needed anything else. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video, that it taught you a little bit about florals, and I hope that you'll play along with us. Use hashtag Mixed Media Menagerie and MMMMay22. If you want to join us, you can apply to be a guest artist. The link will be in the description box below. And also don't forget that there are mini kits available from Peace Craft with Love that has some of the products that we use in our videos. And I really hope you enjoyed. Again, I hope that you'll play along with us. Make sure you check out Erin, Nicole, and Jolene's video. And make sure you tag us on Instagram and YouTube. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And thank you again for watching.